We have a little gardening thing going on today. You have Moses confronted by the bush that's burning but doesn't get consumed. We have Jesus telling a parable about figs and non-productive fig trees. And you have Jesus saying, listening to people as they tell him about the disasters that just happened. One, because of Pilate and his Roman ways of persecuting the Jews, and the tower that fell accidentally on people. For us, the second part, God doesn't act through things like that. God doesn't act through accidents. If a tower falls, if we have 9/11, God's not getting even with us through natural disasters. Although that was a terrorist disaster, that's not God getting even with us. The accidents that we see every day, the structures that fall down and hurt people, not God's way of getting even with us. But some people have a tendency to see bad things in the world and say, see, God is punishing us. That's baloney. Besides baloney, it's strange theology. It's the theology of Rose, my mother. When we would get hurt or something would happen as kids, she would say, that's God's getting even with you. God doesn't get, I thought that was true. I mean, it comes from your mother, you got to believe it, right? But no, it's wrong. God doesn't get even with us through natural disasters. Natural disasters are just that, natural disasters that happen in the world. How we respond is a key. How we respond to the natural disasters in our lives, in our families, and in the world disasters is our response, is the comment we make back to God when we look around and we see things in the world that are not so profitable, not so positive. Today we mentioned that His Holiness was released from the hospital. He's 88. God knows how long he will live. But, and this is not meant to be disrespectful, he will die. And so will all we die. And that's not God's way of getting even with us. We know from our faith that death was introduced into our existence by our disobedience to God in our ancestors way back when. So we have the theology of death being natural, which we accept, not as a punishment, but as a result of past sin. In other words, we were made to live, and because we reject God, our lives come to an end. When they come to an end, it's not a punishment. It's the natural way life goes on and concludes. So we hear Jesus talking to his they're like his critics, because he's talking about love and goodness and patience and all this good stuff, and then saying, oh yeah, well, what about the blood that Pilate put into the sacrifices? He killed those people. What about the poor Galileans who got hit with that tower? They weren't doing anything wrong. And Jesus is saying, yeah, but don't think that they are any worse than anybody else. It's not God's way to punish through natural disasters, hurricane, storms, tornadoes. That's not God's way of punishing us through nature. Nature is nature. God created it and set it into motion, and it's up to us to respond. And think of natural disasters. What a great opportunity for us to take care of those who suffer, to take care of those who lose their homes or their livelihoods. It inspires, or should inspire in us, charity, to do good, to help. And that's why in our diocese, as well as dioceses throughout the world, the bishops always come forward and say, okay, let's have a special collection for this disaster or that disaster. It's a way of getting us involved in a positive way to what looks terrible in nature. Separate idea, but in the garden idea, Jesus is talking about fig trees and so on, who don't produce. Is he talking about us? Well, we can apply it to ourselves. He certainly didn't directly apply it to us. But he gives a parable of the man going, now I want to pick a fig. And fig trees usually flower and produce the fruit after 3 years. So that's why the 3 years is mentioned. I'm going to cut it down, tells the gardener, cut it down, throw it away, get rid of it. Why should it occupy soil? Well, let's look into that little story that Jesus is using as a parable for ourselves. Producing, doing good. All of us, quote, occupy soil. We're all in the world. We're all doing different things in the world. When is our opportunity to do good available to us? Tie that into the disasters. We always have the opportunity to forgive, to do good, to love. During the season of Lent, that opportunity is pronounced because the 3 pillars of Lent are food, fasting, giving to the poor, almsgiving, and prayer. So these 40 days of Lent give us a good opportunity to look at the scriptures and apply them to ourselves. Is God talking about me not producing love, not producing forgiveness, not producing patience? They're our fruit, and it gives us a good opportunity to reflect on the season of Lent when we hear stories like this. These can be applied to our faith journey, these stories. And the story of Moses can be applied to our faith journey during these 40 days, but throughout our lives. Now, the reason Moses is taking care of Jethro's flocks is because, long story short, Moses was a Jew. His mother, in order to save him from the enemies, put him in a basket and let him float down the Nile. And who finds him but the princess, the Pharaoh's daughter? This is in Genesis, in Exodus. And the story goes on. And she adopts the kid, brings her child to the Pharaoh. She says, I want to adopt this kid as mine. Okay. He might have dubious origins, might be a Jew, but we want to adopt him. So they adopt him. And he's educated as an Egyptian. Now you got to think of black and white, the enemies of the Jews, the Egyptians at that point. And the Jews there are enslaved by the Egyptians. So he adopts Moses. Moses grows up as a prince. And then it hits Moses, his conscience kicks in, when he sees one of the Pharaoh's soldiers beating one of the slaves. He jumps in, and don't forget, this is a prince. He's like hot stuff in Pharaoh's family. He swoops down and rescues the man who is being beaten by the soldier. And in their altercation, he kills him. Now, we're not advertising murder, but we just realize what happens. Well, because of that, he now becomes a victim. He flees because word is that this guy who's a Jew just killed an Egyptian, so we got to kill him. Very simple thinking. So he flees and he goes into the desert. There he meets someone, marries her, that's Jethro's daughter, and now he's a farmer. He takes care of the sheep, and now we go to the bush. So he sees a bush burning, again, nature, And he notices that it's burning, but it's not being consumed. You know the story. Cecil B. DeMille did a good job, and all the Hollywood producers did a good job in trying to get that idea across. But it's a very simple idea. That non-consuming bush was a sign of God's presence. And that's for us. That's 21st century. Where do I see God? Where are the opportunities in which I can meet God? So he approaches the bush, and the voice, God's voice, the angel's voice, says to him, don't come any closer because this is sacred ground. Take off your shoes, sandals. So he does. And he has a mandate. Now, approach it as a bush and a burning bush and the voice, but also approach it as our conscience. See, we've got to update the scriptures. We don't change them, but we have to apply them to ourselves. And what's my conscience say? Well, the conscience of Moses said, as God is speaking to him, go free my people. Release them from the bondage of the pharaohs. Well, I'm on the outs right now. And by the way, who am I talking to? Which would be a likely thing any of us would say if we heard a voice. And the voice says, well, you go to my people and you tell them that I want them free and I want them led out of the Pharaoh's possessions. They're not chattel, and bring them to a land flowing with milk and honey. And he does that. He says, but I have a question. Who should I say sent me? Again, this is for us today. I am sent you. I am, being, the eternal one, the one without a beginning and no end, sent you. Again, on our behalf, Moses confronts and creates a dialogue in the scriptures, and he comes to realize that I can't see God, but I can talk to God. Hence our conscience, hence our prayer lives. I can't see God, and God is sending me on a mission to do good, using my own ability, my own status, my own intelligence, my own education. And again, that's for us. God's sending all of us each day, not for disasters, each day, to bring his word and his life into the world and into our lives first. Now is the time. Each day is the time. And there's no time like the present to take God into our lives and to bring him out there. Yes, we know God through Jesus Christ. We know the incarnation. So we have a physical image in our minds of Jesus, the Word of God made flesh. And that's what's been translated to us. That's what's been handed on to us. Jesus is the one that we're being sent to represent in the world, in our clubs, in our homes, in our classrooms, on our campus. Not me, Jesus. And the message of Jesus, we know it. We screw it up all year long, and that's why we have Lent, to reconcile and bring ourselves back to God. We know the message of Jesus: forgiveness, love, peace. And yet, so many of us in our society want vengeance, hate, blood. Not available for the Christian. The Christian is challenged to come in confrontation with God, almost like a burning bush, the non-visual God, the Yahweh. And who is that God? Being, the Creator. Any word lacks who God is. And we can't say him, her, it. God is the creator. God, and God makes it very clear. And this is old scripture. This happened like 1850 BC when God reveals himself without a name. He reveals himself to Moses in the scriptures, and the Jews and us, with a phrase that is simply awesome. Who am I going to say sent me? Yes, is the voice. What do you mean, yes? I am sending you. Okay, who are you? I am. I mean, it could get kind of complicated and comical. And I don't know which comedian it was years ago. I think it was Flip Wilson. I'm from Jersey City, and he was from Jersey City. And he did this skit on Moses talking to God and being sent by God, and God giving him his name by saying, I am. Well, who's sending me? I am. Makes no sense. It's like circular thinking. But it was very clear in the scriptures that God cannot be encompassed. God doesn't meet your schedule or my schedule. God can't be imposed on the disasters of the world. God is, and God is with us, always and everywhere. And there's no limitations. So there's nothing we can do in our lives that necessarily excludes God, unless you and I wish to exclude God. And God is available in a way that's so personal to each one of us. That's why during Lent we emphasize the 3 pillars, but one of those pillars of Lent is prayer. Getting to know I am, getting to know Yahweh, getting to know the Nameless One, who has revealed a lot of information to us through his son Jesus. Now is the time, and there's no time like the present, to know God and with Moses, share God with all who need to hear about him. The journey of 40 days continues.